Our theme for the last few weeks has been the wheel, the spiral, and the goal. And so far we've been looking at the wheel of life, the Buddhist wheel of life. And we've seen that this represents our normal situation, our normal existential situation as unenlightened beings, in which we're basically going round and round in circles, trapped in an unsatisfactory, limited version of ourselves and limited experience of the world around us, which we in fact create for ourselves. So we also saw that within the wheel there are a number of so-called realms. Somewhere. Yeah, there are 6 realms within the wheel. A number of different states of being that we can inhabit, which effectively means a number of different worlds we can live in. The world we live in is determined by our state of being, how we experience things. So if we're possessed by negative emotions and states of mind, we're going to live in a dark and unpleasant world, ugly world. If we experience positive emotions, positive states of mind, we'll live in a much more bright and beautiful world. So the 6 realms of being shown in the wheel of life are 6 states of being and 6 kinds of being that we could become, if you like. And they're traditionally seen as actual worlds. They're seen as actual worlds we would be reborn into within traditional Buddhism, according to our karma. Not as any sort of a reward or punishment, but just because those worlds would be a natural expression of the way we are, the sort of being that we are. And you can go out in Sheffield any day of the week, if you like, and probably meet people who are in just about all of these different realms of being. People are living in very different worlds, although they might all be apparently living in Sheffield. And we saw that some of these realms can be very painful states of suffering. So there's a hell realm somewhere. Yeah, there's a hell realm in which we experience a lot of very unpleasant negative states of mind. And when we do that, we will suffer. It will be a sort of hell for us. And many of us will have spent a little bit of time, at least, in some sort of hell realm. And then there's the realm of the hungry ghosts, or the praetors, where beings are ruled by craving. So they're shown as having tiny mouths, and tiny throats, and great big bellies, which symbolises that they can never get enough. They can never get enough of what they crave. They exist in this constant state of craving. And when they do get what they crave, it actually hurts them. So they're shown, poor things, as having sort of swords sticking out of their belly or their throat, where what they do take in actually hurts them. So at its most extreme, this is the realm of the addict. But at a less extreme level, it's also the realm of our consumer society. Being the consumer, always wanting more stuff, more gadgets, more entertainment, more this, more that, never being satisfied with what we have. That's a sort of minor version of the hungry ghost realm. Then there are realms that might involve less suffering, but where spiritual progress is not really possible. So there's the realm of the animals, the state where we're just ruled by biological drives, fear, desire for food, sex, comfort, sleep. And then there's the realm of the asuras, or the titans, the big egos who are always competing for power. The world that many politicians and business people might live in. There's the realm of the devas, sometimes called the god realm, although they're not really gods as we would understand them. The god realm is a realm of refined pleasure, beauty, where beings experience no suffering, and there are no challenges to overcome. And then finally there's the realm of the humans, a realm where there's just the right mix of pleasure and pain to make spiritual progress possible. A realm where we take responsibility, take on challenges, work together with others, form relationships with others, have empathy for others, a realm where we can grow spiritually in a way that we can't in any of the others. And as we've seen, the wheel of life is a vicious circle. It's an expression of the problem. And the whole point of the wheel of life is that we need to get out of it. So in the first talk of this series, I likened the wheel of life to a computer game. A computer game in which we sort of find ourselves in this rather sinister ancient castle. Going from chamber to chamber through all sorts of tunnels and passages and corridors, coming to all sorts of different places within this castle. Some of them are fascinating, some of them are terrifying, and some are just sort of in between. But the idea of this computer game is to find the secret door that gets you out of the castle. There are all sorts of apparently fascinating things you can do in the 6 realms, in the different bits of this castle. You can find treasures and jewels, and you can fight battles and rivalries and defeat enemies and all sorts of things like that, but none of it gets you anywhere. Because any score that we pick up in any of the different realms in the castle is bound to be taken away from us in some horrible dungeon or other where we'll end up eventually. So all those scores that we could get in various different realms, they don't amount to anything. They're just beside the point. In fact, the only way to get any score is to find the hidden door out of the wheel of life. And on to the spiral that Maitridasa is going to talk to us about next week. And then up the spiral to the goal. So the wheel, the spiral, and the goal. So the wheel of life is a bit like a sort of map, a set of instructions, a manual for this particular computer game. It tells us the places we might find ourselves in the 6 realms, the states of mind we could experience. And it tells us where to look for the secret door that leads right out of the wheel and right out of the castle and onto a completely different level of reality. And that door, that secret door that it's all about finding, is in the human realm. Not the lovely realm of the gods, and certainly not the horrible realm of the hell beings or the hungry ghosts, but it's in the human realm. So we've seen that there is a Buddha in each realm, helping beings in that realm with the different things that is needed in each realm, traditionally shown in the symbol of the wheel of life. And the Buddha in the human realm is showing, all these Buddhas like signposts. They're signposts towards the human realm. And then the Buddha in the human realm is pointing to the door. And he's pointing to the door with the book of the Dharma. The goal, our aim, is to spend as much of the time as we can in the human realm. And that might sound, because that's where the door is, and that might not sound very exciting. And we might think, well, I'm already human, so what's the point about that? But actually, having a human body is no guarantee of living in the human realm. In fact, it's quite an achievement to spend most of our time in the human realm. That's a big achievement for a person with a human body to actually spend our time in the human realm. So for most of it, that's the goal. The goal is to become a happy, healthy, responsible, emotionally positive human being who takes responsibility for themselves, who has the strength to face challenges and take on external responsibilities, who can empathise with others, who can form friendships with others, who can work together with others, who can come together with others to create positive communities. That's what we need to focus on. That's what we need to focus on, because that's what puts us in the human realm. If we achieve that, we'll be in the human realm, and that's the place that we can find the door. That's where the door is hidden. And once we are in the human realm, once we achieve that, then the actual instructions for finding the secret door are explained in a sort of code. So unfortunately, you'll have to imagine the Wheel of Life sitting there. We've seen that they've got these realms, and then around it there are these weird hieroglyphic symbols right around the very edge of the Wheel of Life. And it's those symbols, it's those weird hieroglyphic symbols that actually point the way. They're like some sort of code written on the side of written in this ancient castle in some secret language, showing us the way to the door, if only we know how to interpret them. And that's mainly what I'm going to talk about tonight. What do they mean? And these hieroglyphs, they're a series of 12 pictures. Variety of things: a potter making a wheel, a blind man going along with a stick, a man with an arrow in his eye, a woman giving birth, all sorts of apparently rather weird symbols. Some men in a boat, a guy in a house, there's all sorts of these weird symbols. And what these pictures represent is what are traditionally called the 12 links in the chain of conditioned co-production. Somewhere. I failed on a few of these. I'm not very good at judging the spaces on the flip chart. So, the 12 links. No, not that one. All right, whatever. The 12 links, the 12 Nidanas of cyclical conditionality. The 12 links, 12 Nidana means links. So the 12 links in the chain of conditioned co-production. And I'm not going to talk about all of these 12 links, because actually to do so would take more time than I've got this evening, and I can only do it in this very superficial way, which wouldn't really give us much of an understanding of it. So I'm going to talk about just a few of these links, but they're the important ones, because they're the ones that surround the place where we've got any choice about getting off the wheel. They're the ones that really surround the secret door, if you like. So I'm just going to focus down on the weak link, the hidden door. The whole cycle of the 12 Nidanas going round the wheel represent the way we continually remake ourselves by the choices we make, by our actions. So it shows how what we've done and been in the past, if we're not careful, determines how we act in the present. And then how we act in the present, that determines by the law of karma the sort of person that we become in the future. And of course that person we become in the future then becomes the person we were in the past, and so we go around. So you'll notice this is a closed loop. It's a completely closed loop in which we have no choices unless we break out of it somehow. Traditionally, this process of the past self determining how we live and how we think and how we act and how we speak in the present, and then that forming the person we become in the future, and then round we go again. Traditionally, that's linked to the process of rebirth. It's seen as operating over 3 lives. So it shows how in the past life influences the present life, and how the present life, how we behave, think, act, speak in the present life will create the future life. But the process operates just as well in one life. You don't have to think of it in terms of rebirth. The 12 links are just as much about this life as they are about future lives. We were a different person in the past. We will be a different person in the future. We don't need to die and be reborn to make that happen. So unless we're careful, unless we do something about it, this whole process of the past creating the present, which determines the future, goes on quite unconsciously and automatically. The person we've been determines how we respond now, that creates the person we become in the future. And round and round and round till we're so stuck in our ruts that we can't seem to find any way out at all. And we can think of endless examples of how this works. You can think of any number of examples of how it works within one life. So say somebody is a bit timid at school, I don't know. So say we're a bit timid at school, so we feel a bit anxious and threatened when we're confronted by any sort of challenge, so we avoid challenges, so we become more anxious and timid as our life goes on. Try and avoid challenges even more, etc., etc. The examples are endless. Where behaving as the sort of person we think we are, if you like, the past has created, just deepens our tendencies. Unless we do something about it. And we get stuck in that sort of vicious circle where we react, but we don't act. We don't act proactively. We're always just responding automatically. We're not determining what will happen, the sort of person we'll become in a creative and active way. So to see where this hidden door is, how we might find the hidden door and break out of that vicious circle, we need to look a bit more closely at just a few of the links in the 12 links in the chain. So the hidden door, we all know this, is what we call the gap. We talk about the gap in introductory classes. In our introductory classes, we tend to simplify this bit of the wheel, actually. And we talk about the old self, the usual old self, and we talk about that being subjected to a stimulus where the world pushes our buttons. And we talk about the usual response to that stimulus where we do the comfortable thing we're used to doing, and that just goes back around the wheel. Or the gap is that we don't have to do the usual thing. We don't have to do the usual thing. We can do something different. We can choose to do something different, which will probably feel quite uncomfortable. We can choose to do something different and start making creative choices rather than just responding with the person we become. So we say that the gap comes between the stimulus when the world pushes our buttons and our usual response. If we choose not to react as we usually do something different and creative, we break into the circle. And we start to reinvent ourselves as more like the person we would like to be. We are able to make conscious choices, able to form ourselves, rather than being ruled by our past conditioning. So tonight I'm going to look at that's the sort of slightly simplified version that we usually present on newcomers courses. Tonight I'm going to look at the full thing, actually, including the Sanskrit. Heaven help us. And I'm going to look at that sort of bit of the wheel around the gap a bit more closely. So, as I've said, the gap, around the edge of the wheel of life, we have these 12 pictures, these 12 hieroglyphs, representing this cyclical process of conditionality we want to break into. And I'm going to start with one particular one. The first of the pictures I'm going to talk about, on the relevant part of the wheel, shows a man sitting in a house. A man sitting in a house with the doors and windows all wide open. So we can imagine that anything or anyone that wants to come in these doors or windows can come in and have whatever effect they want to have on the man. So this represents what's called sadayatana, the six senses. This represents the six senses. We usually think of five senses, don't we? We've got vision, hearing, touch, taste, and something else. Smell, that's it. In Buddhism there are six senses traditionally. The mind is seen as another sense organ. It senses mental objects. So, memories, thoughts, etc. are sensed by the mind. So the six senses. The usual five that we think of, and the mind. So that's the first of these pictures, a house with all the doors and windows open, with a man sitting in it, representing the six senses open to all the stimuli that the world can throw at us. And then the next picture around the edge shows a man and woman embracing each other passionately. And this represents what's called sparsha, or contact. So we've had the senses, this represents contact. So something comes through the doors or windows of the house, and it makes contact with the man sitting in the house. It has an effect on him. The person the pastor's made us comes in contact with the world through the senses. The person we have become comes in contact with the world through the senses, including our inner sense, the mind. So something impinges on us through the senses. Some experience happens. Could be we see something, we smell something, we hear something, we hear some words, or a thought comes up in our mind. Something impinges on us through the senses. And then the next picture shows a man with an arrow in his eye, howling in pain, with his face grimacing. And this represents what's called Vedana, or feeling. Not feeling in the sense of emotion, but just feeling in the sense that each of these every time a sense object impinges on us, it brings with us a sense of either pleasant, I like it, or not pleasant. That's what Vedana means, just that sense of, pleasant or not pleasant. Ice cream, pleasant. Spider, unpleasant. Praise, pleasant. Criticism, unpleasant. Nice memory, pleasant. Not very nice memory, And so that's what Vedana means, just that sense of nice, not nice. And even if we're not aware of it, often this is happening at an almost subconscious level. Even if we're not aware of it, it's going on all the time. And it's often very intense. I think if you think about your experience, it's often very, very intense, this Vedana. This sense of, that's really great, or that's really terrible. It can be very, very intense. You can wake up in the night and think about some episode that happened 5 years ago and go, oh my God, did I really say that? It's really intense. Hence, the strength of that image of a man with an arrow in his eye, that it's really it's not just subtle, it's actually really intense. So the next in our series of images is a man sitting down, presumably after a long hot day working in the dusty fields, working in the sun. A man sitting down and a woman bringing him a cool drink. And this represents what's called in Sanskrit Trishna, literally thirst. Literally thirst. And this is usually interpreted as craving. But in a sense, craving is just one side of it. Trishna is our response to the Vedana, our willed response to the Vedana. If something gives us a pleasant Vedana, we want to grab it, drink it down, eat it, own it, whatever. We want to grab it, we want to have it. If something gives us an unpleasant Vedana, we want to push it away. We want to push it away or fight with it or destroy it. The sight of a biscuit, positive Vedana, let me eat it. Hear some criticism, negative Vedana. Want to destroy it, push the source of the Vedana away, defend ourselves hotly, get angry and criticize back, whatever, So this is what governs an awful lot of our behaviour, actually. We are responding, often perhaps not particularly consciously, to Vedana. Trying to grab and have what we like, what gives us a pleasant Vedana, push away, fight with, destroy what gives us a negative Vedana. And if we do that, if we respond as we usually do, then this leads on to the next picture. A woman gathering fruit. Which represents upadana, or attachment. Lovely, bright, shining fruit. Give me more. I'll put more in my basket. I really want this fruit. It's mine. Then going on round the wheel, we have a pregnant woman. And she represents becoming. We are becoming the person we have created by our actions, by the way we've responded when the world pushed our buttons. And then a woman giving birth, which is, not surprisingly, the stage of birth. And we're always being born. We're always being born. We're always being reborn. Always changing, always remaking ourselves by the way we act and how that operates through the law of karma, how we respond to the world we experience. And if we keep doing that, we just go round and round and we get more and more stuck in our ruts, round and round the wheel. So that's the sort of business end of the wheel of life. There's more stuff around the top of it. I'm not going to go into all of that because we'd be here all night. As I said, frankly, I'm not sure I understand it all, to be honest. I think I understand this bit. So the weak link in this chain of 12 Nidanas, the point of escape from the wheel, the gap that we're always talking about, comes between Vedana and Krishna, between feeling and craving. We don't have any choice about the feeling. The feeling is created by our past. We do have a choice about how we respond to the feeling, and that is the cause of the future. So we've got no choice about the feeling we experience when somebody criticises us, for example. That may be the result of our past. Maybe we had a critical parent or a critical teacher, and that just brings all that up and we have that feeling. But we do have a choice about whether we retaliate with harsh words, or whether we sulk, or whether we in fact listen to see if there's any truth in what's being said. And that is the door that leads out of the wheel. It's the place where we can stop being on automatic pilot and start actually creating our own life. When we don't respond to Vedana, pleasant, must have it, unpleasant, push it away. When we don't respond with Trishna, but choose to do the ethical, skillful thing anyway, we break the chain. And we start to create a more positive person, we get onto the spiral path that we're going to talk about. We step off the wheel. So I think there's a book title that brings this across really well. I don't know, it might be an absolute rubbish book, but there's a book which is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, feeling the craving and doing it anyway, feeling the irritation and doing the skillful thing anyway, feeling threatened and doing the skillful thing anyway. It's about not responding to Vedana. It's about choosing to do the creative, ethical thing. So hear the criticism, feel the defensive anger, and listen openly anyway. We don't have to be ruled by Vedana. Feel the morning laziness and get up and meditate anyway. The list is endless. The number of ways we can make creative choices rather than following our unconscious or semi-conscious responses is endless. And when we do that, when we decide to act creatively, even when this feels uncomfortable, we step off the wheel and onto the spiral, which Maitridasa is going to talk to us about next week. So the hidden door lies between feeling and craving, between Vedana and Krishna. Trishna, I keep saying Krishna. Trishna. We know where it is. Hooray! We learned about it in the second week of the introductory class. It's not that hidden at all, is it, really? We know where it is, and in principle we know how to open it, but it isn't as simple as that, is it? It isn't as simple as that, because actually to open this door, we need a key. Just knowing the door is there is not enough, is it? Because, well, why? Because often this whole thing happens so fast, that we've reacted before we're even aware of the Vedana. Often we're not even aware of the Vedana. Somebody says something, we snap. The biscuit's there, we eat it. Whatever, we're just reacting to Vedana so quickly. Vedana comes so quickly, and we're so bombarded with it that we're just acting like that all the time. So it's not particularly easy. And it also often means doing things that don't feel very pleasant. So, the key is not just readily available. So what are the keys? Actually, we need 3 keys at least. What are the keys? So the first key is awareness, mindfulness. We need to be actually quite mindful even to spot what we're feeling and do anything different about it. Usually it's all happened so quickly that we're not even aware that at some level we don't like that person, so we responded like this, or we're not even aware of that. It's just going on almost subconsciously. We need to be aware of what we're feeling and aware enough to make conscious decisions about it before we can do any of this. And this is where, of course, meditation comes in, the mindfulness of breathing. It gives us that practice in a sort of slowed down sort of practice arena where we can actually spot our mental states coming up and deal with them in a skillful way. And it generally just makes us much more aware of what's going on in us, so that we're able to have some choices. Secondly, we need to develop positive emotion. We need to develop metta, so that we're not just responding on the basis of what I like and what I what I dislike, but we're thinking about others as well. We're thinking about a bigger picture. We need to weaken those negative emotions that our reactions are based on. So we need to do the metta bhavana. That also is one of the keys. And we need to practice ethics. We need to practice the 5 precepts, because practicing the 5 precepts forces us to change old patterns in ways that are creative. So just for example, we might want to just twist the truth a bit, to make an excuse to get out of some sort of little bit of blame. It's unpleasant Vedana, isn't it? Blame. Avoid it. The bus was late. It was raining cats and dogs. The dog ate it. I don't know. Whatever. But then if we're practicing the precepts, if we've taken the precepts on, we get a warning light. Hey, I don't tell lies. I don't tell lies. So we're made aware. We're made aware of that reaction. We're made aware of that Vedana. And we're given a really big clue as to what the alternative skillful action is. So precepts are like warning lights. Face that discomfort, do the skillful thing. Don't just respond on the basis of Vedana. And then when we do that, things change. We start creating a proper, honest relationship with that person that we would have lied to effectively. We start developing a sense of ourselves as a strong, upright person. So by practicing the precepts, we stop responding automatically to Vedana. We become more conscious of Vedana and what's going on. And we start being able to make creative decisions where our decisions are based on what's skillful, not what just feels good or doesn't feel bad. They help us spot where we're being reactive, and they help us to choose differently. They help us to change. So those are the keys. Practice the mindfulness of breathing, practice the metta bhavana, practice the 5 precepts. Where have we heard this before? So the key to the door is the basics of Buddhism. The key to the door is the basics of Buddhism that we teach on every newcomer's course. And that's, of course, what the Buddha offers in the human realm. In all the other realms, he's pointing the way to the human realm. In the human realm, he's offering the Dharma. So we've all got the keys that will let us out of the virtual castle in which we've been trapped and into a brighter world. All we need to do now is use them. I could end at that point. But I'm not going to. So tonight, so far, I've talked about one particular formulation of what we call reactive conditionality or cyclical conditionality, where we go round and round and round. And I've talked about one Nidana chain, if you like, on one gap. But no one formula can sum up the complexity of conditioned co-production of the way the world works and us in it. And there are other examples of this sort of conditionality in the Pali Canon, for example, and other examples of gaps as well. So, because we all know about the gap between feeling and craving, don't we? We all know about it, whether we practice it or not. I'm going to end by looking at another example of a vicious circle, which comes up in the Pali Canon, another example of reactive cyclical conditionality. And what I'm going to present is a rather simplified version of a sort of Nidana chain that crops up in a few suttas. The Honeyball Sutta, among others. You might want to look up the Honeyball Sutta if you want to look at this in a bit more detail. And in these suttas, in the Honeyball Sutta, what's looked at is the relationship between the stories we tell about the world and about other people, and the way we perceive the world and other people, and the way we act in the world and react to the world and other people. So this Nidana chain you could start it again with contact. Something in the world impinges on our senses or our mind. Something comes in, something pushes one of our buttons. And this gives rise to Vedana, to a pleasant or unpleasant sensation. So say, for example, using an example that I've sort of been harping on about all through this talk, well, maybe not quite, but say someone at work says, well, that thing we tried to do really didn't work, did it? Okay? It didn't get us where we hoped to be. And maybe we get an unpleasant Vedana at hearing that. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that. And that unpleasant Vedana comes along, immediately we hear the words. It's not like one thing comes before the other, they just come absolutely together. And the next step then in this process is what's called in Sanskrit samnya. And samnya is often translated as perception, but what it actually means is labelling. And I think it's quite an interesting concept, this, because it's something that we perhaps don't think about very much. But we're always labelling our sense impressions. So that sort of stripy thing over there, red and white stripes, that's Jenny. I know that. I don't just think, well, it's a sort of stripy thing. That's not a sort of grey and black mess, that's a camera, and that's Dave, and that's a speaker, and that's a podium. So I'm constantly translating these raw sense impressions and labelling the things of my experience. So that, yeah, this is a podium. Well, but it could be all sorts of things. To somebody from a different culture, they might think, well, that's a really weird canoe. Or that's a really good bit of firewood, if they'd never come across a podium. Or to a leprechaun, they might think it's a high-rise. Could live, it's got 3 floors in it, you know. So the way we label things isn't fixed. It's not like this is definitely a podium. That's a label that we put on things. So, you know, and the way we label things makes a real difference to our response to them. So, it's a piece of string on the floor, great. It's a snake on the floor. So, yeah, we're always labeling, samnya-ing our experience, the things of our experience. And in the example in question, somebody says, well, that didn't really work, did it? That didn't get us where we wanted to go, did it? And maybe we label that criticism. We think, oh, they're getting at me because I didn't do whatever. Well, once again, maybe it's not criticism, maybe somebody else, maybe it's something different. Maybe the person is confessing to the fact that they didn't do very well, or maybe they're just asking for an open discussion about why it didn't work. But we label it criticism. And then in our example, the next step is another quite interesting concept, which is prapancha. And prapancha is a really interesting Buddhist concept, and it's got quite a few translations, but probably the best is mental proliferation. So mental proliferation. We get thoughts, and the thoughts build up into other thoughts, and the thoughts turn into stories about what's going on, and then the stories generate other stories about what's going on, and blah, 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 and until we've eventually built a whole melodrama about the fact that the person said, well, that didn't really work, did it? So we start telling stories about what's going on the basis of our labelling. He doesn't like me. He's after getting me in trouble. In fact, he wants to give my job to so-and-so, who I've always known he liked better than me. He's probably going behind my back to the boss and criticising me about this, and so on and so on. And then on the basis of our stories, that's prapancha, on the basis of our stories that we tell, we behave. We start acting in a particular way. Maybe we start acting with them in a way that's closed and defensive. Maybe we start hiding, putting under the carpet anything that doesn't go quite to plan so that we don't open ourselves up to criticism. Maybe we complain and gossip about the person behind their back, try and undermine them. Maybe try and make them look bad in the eyes of the boss. Try and get them to take the blame for something. So the sutras that I've been talking about talk about prapancha leading to, among other things, rivalry, hostility, quarrels and disputes on the basis of the stories we're telling. And then, of course, all that rivalry, hostility, quarrels and disputes are going to set up a particular situation in that workplace, aren't they? An atmosphere, and that's going to influence how others act, so it's going to influence our sense impressions. So back to the beginning, we've got another nice closed loop. But we could look at the other way as well. There's more going on here, because our prapancha, the stories we're telling, will also influence how we label. If we're telling the story that this person doesn't like me, this person's critical of me, this person's after my job, then we will hear things they say as criticism, even if they're not. We can see this in all sorts of spheres with ourselves. If we think the world is a terrifying, threatening place, we see danger everywhere, etc., etc., etc. If we think all human beings are out for themselves and they're no good, we'll see that everywhere. So the way we label other people's behaviour, things that happen to us in the world, is really heavily influenced by the stories we're telling, our prapancha. And then the way we label things determines how we feel about them, the feelings they give them. Once again, if we label it a snake, negative prapancha. If we label it a string of licorice, I don't know, I'm like, yes, I'll eat that, positive prapancha. The way we label things determines our feeling to them. So we've got this quite complicated situation where contact leads to feeling, leads to labelling, leads to our stories, leads to rivalry, quarrels and disputes, and they all feed back. The way we think about the stories we tell influences how we label things, which influences how we feel. So there's another example of a different sort of cyclical conditionality that influences the way we behave, creates situations. So, how do we break into that one? You know, there's a gap. There's got to be a gap in that one. How do we break into that one? Well, okay, the way we break into that one is to really seriously stand back from, disidentify from, really question the stories we tell about everything. And this is really important because in a very real way, our whole world is built up of the stories we tell. So we might tell all sorts of stories. We might tell a story that we need to have money to be happy, or that life is all about being successful. We need success to be happy. I've got to have security. I must have security. I can't take risks. Another story. I have to live like everybody else. I have to follow the script my parents laid out to me. That's another story. Otherwise, I'll be cast into the wilderness. If I have that sort of car, I'll be that sort of person, and people will look up to me. I'll be really, I don't know, sexy or exciting or something. Or if I listen to that sort of music, I'll be that sort of person, and then everybody will think, oh, he's really cool. And so it goes on, you know, stories about the world. And we all tend to live in a set of stories that we've created for ourselves. And all too often, these turn into a sort of prison because they limit our freedom to live a life that would be really fulfilling. So getting back to where we started, the prison of the wheel of life, that castle that we need to escape from, is created to a large extent by our stories. The asuras, the big egos, they tell a story that life is a competition, that it's all about winning, getting power and status, and anyone who doesn't do that is a loser. And then the hungry ghosts, they tell a story that the things they crave will bring them happiness if only they could get enough of them. And then the devas, the godlike beings, well, they tell the story that life shouldn't involve any challenges, that uncomfortable and challenging situations are there to be avoided, and that we should never have any experience of suffering. So, to a large extent, those realms of the wheel of life are built out of stories. They're built out of the stories we tell. So, questioning our stories of what life is about is part and parcel of getting off the wheel. It goes along with being in the gap. It goes along with being in the gap. It goes along with making skillful choices based on reality and not on our stories. So if we do that, if we question our stories, if we get off, if we question our stories and we act skillfully rather than responding to Vedana, then we will get off the wheel and we will get onto the spiral, which Maitridasa is going to talk about next week, which leads us all the way to the goal, which is real fulfillment.